Hey everyone, and welcome back. We've got something super interesting lined up for you today. It's all about accents. Specifically, we're diving into the world of accent modification to help you communicate even more effectively in English.
Yeah, it's something that comes up a lot. People want to know how they can make their English clearer and more easily understood, especially in professional or international settings.
Exactly. And we've been lucky enough to get our hands on some really insightful articles and a fantastic study guide packed with techniques. So our mission today is to sort of break it all down and bring you the key takeaways.
The real gems, so to speak.
Absolutely. And I think the first thing to stress, and our sources are super clear on this, is that we're talking about accent modification, not elimination. Sometimes it's called accent management. And it's really about making strategic adjustments to your pronunciation, not about trying to erase your unique voice or pretend to be from somewhere you're not.
Right, right. The goal is clarity and confidence, not conformity.
I love that. Clarity and confidence. Because, your accent is a part of you. It reflects your background, your culture, your journey. And our sources emphasize that so many accents are absolutely charming and contribute to the richness of language. It's about making sure your message is heard, not about sounding like everyone else.
It's about fine-tuning, I guess, like making subtle shifts that enhance your communication without compromising who you are.
So to map out our deep dive today, we'll start by tackling some of those common myths surrounding accents and the whole idea of accent modification. Then we'll really define what it is and what it isn't, looking at things like setting realistic goals. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty, the actual nuts and bolts of English pronunciation, the things that have the biggest impact on how clearly you're understood, like vowels, consonants, stress, intonation, connected speech, all that good stuff. And finally, we'll share some practical exercises and resources that you can start using right away.
Awesome. Sounds like a plan.
So, myth-busting time. First up, and this one pops up all the time, is that accent reduction means getting rid of your accent altogether.
Yeah, like you have to sound completely neutral, whatever that means.
And our sources are very clear. This is simply not true. One article puts it really succinctly, saying the aim is modification, not eradication.
It's such a key distinction because think about it, our accents are so intertwined with our identity. To completely lose that, well, it can feel like losing a part of yourself.
It's like asking someone to give up their history. And it's often just not realistic anyway. We pick up speech patterns early in life and they become deeply ingrained. But making strategic adjustments, that's definitely doable.
Right, it's about making conscious choices about how we want to sound.
Okay, so myth number 2 is that having an accent is a disadvantage. And I think we both agree that this is just plain wrong.
Completely. I mean, think about all the amazing accents in the world. They add color, they add personality, they make communication more interesting.
One of our articles puts it beautifully, saying, many accents are charming and contribute to linguistic diversity. It's a celebration of individuality, not something to be ashamed of.
Right. The goal is clarity, not some kind of bland uniformity. We want to understand each other, sure, but we also want to appreciate the unique tapestry of voices out there.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Ugh.
Now, here's a myth that might surprise some people, that accent modification is only for those who learned English as a second language. But, and one of our articles point this out specifically, native speakers with strong regional accents can also benefit from accent modification.
Oh, that's so true. Think about someone who grew up in a region with a very distinct dialect. If they're working in a field where they need to communicate with people from all over the world, making their speech a bit more universally understandable can be a real asset.
Totally. It's not about erasing their regional identity. It's about making sure they're heard effectively in a diverse environment.
And it actually brings up this interesting point about what we consider standard English. Because often what we perceive as standard is just another regional accent that has become dominant for historical or social reasons.
It's all relative, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that leads us nicely into our next myth, this idea of achieving a neutral accent.
Ah, the mythical neutral accent.
Exactly. And our sources are pretty clear on this. It's largely a fallacy. One even called it a mythical neutrality, and they say, our goal is wider intelligibility, not necessarily a mythical neutrality.
It's like chasing a unicorn, really, because even what people label as neutral, like general American or received pronunciation, those are specific accents themselves.
They're just accents that have become associated with certain contexts, like broadcasting or education. But they're not inherently neutral or universally understood.
The real question is whether your pronunciation allows your intended audience to grasp your message without struggling. That's the true measure of success.
And finally, let's bust this myth that you can change your accent overnight.
Right, that is just a quick fix.
It's like anything else that's worthwhile. It takes time and effort. One source emphasizes that it requires consistent effort, dedicated practice, and patience. It's a journey, not a destination.
Like learning a musical instrument or a new sport, you wouldn't expect to become a virtuoso pianist after a couple of weeks, right?
Exactly. And changing ingrained speech patterns takes time, it takes practice, it takes commitment. But the good news is, with the right approach, you can absolutely make noticeable and lasting changes.
And those changes can be incredibly empowering.
Okay, so hopefully we've cleared up some of the common misunderstandings. Now let's get down to brass tacks. What exactly is accent modification?
Our sources are pretty consistent in their definitions. It's a process of enhancing your pronunciation to improve your intelligibility, to make it easier for a wider range of English speakers to understand you clearly.
Right. It's not about masking who you are, it's about optimizing how you're heard. One excerpt really nailed it, I think. It said, clearer pronunciation and improved intelligibility without losing your individual speaking style. So it's about amplifying, not erasing. And it's really important to distinguish this from accent elimination, which, as our study guide puts it, aims to eradicate every trace of your native accent.
Yeah, which, as we've talked about, is often not only unrealistic, but also not really what most people want. It's about clarity, not some kind of linguistic erasure.
And it's important to remember that accents are natural. They develop organically from a whole host of influences, our location, our first language. And speaking of first language, there's this concept of L1 interference, where the sounds of our native language kind of spill over into our English pronunciation. Like, for instance, if someone's first language doesn't have the sound, they might naturally substitute an S or a Z when speaking English, and it's totally understandable.
It's like your tongue has muscle memory. It wants to fall back on what it knows. But with practice, you can train it to make those new sounds.
Absolutely. And beyond our first language, there are social and cultural influences, even our own individual quirks in how we speak, our idiolect, as linguists call it. It all adds up to the beautiful diversity of accents we hear every day. One article put it so well, saying, accents are a natural and vibrant part of language. They are not errors or mistakes, but rather reflections of linguistic diversity and cultural heritage.
Accents are like fingerprints, unique and wonderful.
So true. So if you're thinking about accent modification, what are some realistic goals you might set for yourself? Well, as our sources emphasize, the primary goal is to be understood clearly by a wider range of English speakers, regardless of their background or familiarity with your native accent.
Right, it's about broadening your reach, making sure your message can travel further and connect with more people.
And, when you're understood clearly, it just opens up so many possibilities. Our sources talk about increased confidence, greater professional opportunities, smoother social interactions. It can be truly empowering.
Like you're unlocking a new level of communication, being able to express yourself fully and authentically without worrying about whether people are getting what you're saying.
So now let's get into the actual building blocks of clear English pronunciation. And our sources are unanimous on this. Vowel sounds are absolutely crucial. One even says, mastering English vowels is crucial for intelligibility.
It makes perfect sense when you think about it, right? Vowels are the heart of words, and English has a lot of them. We have the single vowel sounds, monophthongs, like the short A in cat, IPA symbol A, and the gliding ones, diphthongs, like the A sound in day, IPA symbol E.
And even those subtle differences in how long you hold a vowel sound can change the meaning of a word. Think ship versus sheep. Just a little bit longer on that vowel, and you've got a completely different word.
And vowel sounds can be tricky because they can vary so much between different accents. Even tiny differences in how you shape your mouth can lead to confusion if the listener isn't used to hearing those variations.
So practice is key. Speaking of sounds, let's talk consonants. Here, we're getting into what linguists call the place and manner of articulation. Basically, where in your mouth you make the sound. Lips, teeth, tongue, and how you control the air, stopping it, creating a narrow passage, etc.
Right. And we can't forget voicing whether or not your vocal cords are vibrating when you make the sound. That's the difference between, say, B and P. And then those fun consonant clusters, unoffer at the beginning of street and to inthink, those can be tricky too.
Consonants really shape the meaning of words, so getting them right is super important.
Absolutely. They provide the framework, the skeleton, upon which the vowels and the rhythm and intonation gild the rest of the word. Without them, you might not be understood at all.
Okay, now let's move on to stress and intonation. which you might think of as the rhythm and music of English. English is what's called a stress-timed language. This means the stressed syllables in words and sentences tend to land at fairly regular intervals, and we have different levels of stress. Word stress, where one syllable in a word is emphasized more than others, and sentence stress, where certain words in a sentence are emphasized to highlight meaning.
I like to think of it as the beat of the language. It's what gives English its characteristic flow. Like, if you think about languages where each syllable is given equal emphasis, it creates a very different rhythmic feel.
Absolutely. And then we've got intonation, the rise and fall of our voice as we speak. It's like the melody layered on top of the rhythm. Intonation tells us so much about the speaker's intentions, their emotions, and even helps clarify grammatical structure. Think about how your voice naturally rises at the end of a question.
Right. And the cool thing about intonation is that it can add so much nuance to what we're saying. Like a simple phrase like, it's fine, can take on completely different meanings depending on the intonation.
It can mean anything from genuine agreement to sarcasm, depending on how you say it. Finally, there's the fascinating phenomenon of connected speech, which is how words tend to blend together in natural flowing conversation. No one speaks in perfectly isolated words, right?
Definitely not. We smooth things out, we drop sounds, we link words together. It's all part of what makes spoken language sound so natural and effortless. But it can also be one of the trickiest things for English learners to master.
So let's unpack some of the ways words connect. First, we have assimilation, where a sound changes to become more like a neighboring sound. A classic example is handbag, which often ends up sounding more like handbag.
And then there's elision, where a sound is dropped altogether, like the D in sandwich often disappears in casual speech.
Liaison, or linking, is when we add a sound between words that end and begin with vowels, like a subtle E sound in go out.
And finally, we have weak forms, where common words like to, the, and a are often reduced to shorter, less stressed versions.
All of these features of connected speech make spoken English sound so much more fluid and natural.
It's like the difference between reading sheet music and hearing a live performance. Connected speech brings the language to life.
Okay, so now you've got a good grasp of the key elements of pronunciation that contribute to clarity. Let's talk about what you can actually do to improve. What are some practical exercises that you, our listener, can try?
Well, the first step, and all our sources agree on this, is developing your phonetic awareness. It's basically ear training, learning to really listen to the sounds of English and distinguish between them.
So actively listening to native speakers in different contexts, movies, podcasts, conversations is a great place to start.
Absolutely. And there are also specific exercises you can do, like sound discrimination drills, where you consciously try to identify those subtle differences between similar sounds.
And one technique that comes up again and again is working with minimal pairs. Can you explain to our listeners what those are and why they're so helpful?
Sure, minimal pairs are words that differ by just one sound, like ship and sheep or bat and bad. And practicing with them helps to sharpen your ear for those tiny but crucial sound differences. As one article puts it, minimal pairs help you sharpen your ear for subtle sound differences.
It's about honing your ear to become more sensitive to the nuances of pronunciation. And another great ear training exercise is phonetic transcription using the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet.
Yeah, the IPA can seem a bit intimidating at first, but it's a really useful tool. It gives you a way to represent the sounds of English visually. And learning to transcribe spoken English can really deepen your understanding of how those sounds are actually produced.
So let's move on to vowel sounds. What are some practical tips for mastering those all-important English vowels?
Well, our sources recommend a few things. First, get yourself a vowel chart. It visually shows you the placement of your tongue and lips for each sound. And practice, practice, practice. Use a mirror to check your mouth movements, and don't be afraid to exaggerate the sounds at first. It can actually help you get a feel for the correct articulation. And of course, work with word lists and sentences that focus on specific vowel sounds.
What about consonant sounds? Any advice for tackling those trickier ones?
Absolutely. Remember place and manner of articulation. Be really mindful of where you're making the sound in your mouth and how you're controlling the airflow. And tongue twisters are your friend. They're a fun way to practice challenging consonant sounds and combinations. And, just like with vowels, minimal pairs are your ally. Focus on those commonly confused consonant sounds like thin and sin or right and light, and do contrastive drills where you deliberately switch between them.
Great advice. Now let's circle back to the music of English. Stress and intonation. How can listeners work on these areas to make their speech more natural and expressive?
Well, for word stress, I always recommend marking the stressed syllable in new words as you learn them. It really helps to embed that pattern in your mind. Practicing words with different stress patterns aloud. For sentence stress, listen to native speakers. Pay attention to which words they emphasize and why, and try rhythm imitation. Listen to a sentence and then try to copy its rhythm. For intonation, it's about becoming aware of the different pitch patterns used in English. Practice recognizing them, and try role-playing different scenarios to get a feel for how intonation can change the meaning of what you're saying.
It's amazing how those subtle shifts in stress and pitch can completely transform the way a message is received. Okay, last but not least, how can we get better at that smooth, connected speech?
Shadowing is a fantastic technique. Listen to a native speaker and try to repeat what they're saying simultaneously. It's like synchronized swimming for your speech. Also, read aloud, paying attention to how words link together naturally. And of course, the more you can practice in real conversations, the more comfortable you'll become with connecting your speech in a natural way. Recording yourself and listening back can be really helpful too.
All fantastic advice.
Huh.
Now, beyond specific exercises, are there any tools or resources that can help our listeners on their accent modification journey?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many great options out there. There are apps like Elsa Speak, which offer personalized pronunciation training, and online dictionaries like Merriam-Webster or Oxford Learners Dictionaries, which almost always include audio pronunciations. You can also find a ton of helpful videos on YouTube channels like English Pronunciation Pod or Rachel's English. And if you're interested in delving into phonetics, there are phonetic transcription tools that can help you visualize sounds. Language exchange platforms are another great option for finding native speakers to practice with. And of course, there are accent reduction courses and qualified pronunciation tutors who can provide more structured guidance.
It sounds like there's something for everyone. Now, for those who are feeling inspired to start working on their pronunciation, any final tips for making practice effective and staying motivated?
Well, consistency is key. As one of our sources puts it, regular, even short practice sessions are more effective than infrequent, long sessions. So make it a habit, even if it's just for a few minutes each day. Focus on specific areas that you want to improve, and don't be afraid to experiment with different exercises. Record yourself regularly to track your progress, and be patient with yourself. Celebrate those small wins, and find ways to make practice enjoyable. It shouldn't feel like a chore.
And it's worth repeating that important message from our sources. Remember that your accent is part of your identity. Accent modification is about enhancing clarity, not erasing who you are.
It's about adding to your toolkit, not changing who you are at your core.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into accent modification, we hope you, our listener, have gained some valuable insights and feel empowered to explore this journey further.
We really encourage you to try out some of the exercises and resources we've discussed. Even focusing on just one aspect of pronunciation can make a real difference.
And on that note, here's a final thought for you to ponder. How might focusing on one specific element, like those tricky vowel sounds or the rhythm of word stress, not only impact how clearly you're understood, but also boost your confidence in your next English conversation? It's often the small, focused efforts that lead to the biggest leaps forward.
Absolutely. Remember, your voice matters, and it has the power to connect you with the world.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time, happy practicing and keep those conversations flowing.